Welcome to another coding tutorial, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this wiper typography. This tutorial is my attempt to recreate a piece by Jongmin Kim, who also has a YouTube channel called Interactive Developer. And on his channel, he has many very inspiring work. I will link his stuff down below, so be sure to check it out. Let's start by figuring out how to draw text on our sketch. So first, what we're going to do is that we're going to come to this arrow here, click the plus sign, and then click Create Folder. Then I'm going to call my folder Fonts. And then this is where we're going to be uploading our font. Click the arrow here, click Upload File, and then you're going to be dropping your file in here. Once your font file is uploaded, what you want to do is that you want to first create a variable. Let's call it font, and then you want to write a function called preload. And this is going to allow you to preload the font before you run the program. And then we're going to set font to another function called load font. And then inside here, we're going to put an argument of where the font is. In my case, it's in the folder called fonts, and then the font is called p5.js-regular.ttf. So that's exactly what I'm going to write in here. Do not forget the quotation mark. So fonts /p5.js-regular.ttf. And then I'm going to click run just to make sure everything is running properly. And it is. All right, so next we're going to draw some piece of text on here. So how about we start by creating a variable called t, and then I'm going to actually just draw letters, and I'm going to draw a letter A, and then we're going to use a function called text, and text can take in 3 arguments. The first one is the piece of string, the piece of text that you want to draw on the sketch. So in our case, it's the variable t. And then the second and the third argument are the x and y coordinates of the bottom left corner of where the text is going to be. So how about we also set 2 more variables, x and y, and then in setup, I'm going to set x to width divided by 2, and then y to be height divided by 2, because I want my text to be in the middle of the sketch. And then I'm going to put x and y here. Let's click run. All right, so as you can see here, it is in the middle of the canvas, and the point that is in the middle of the canvas is the bottom left corner of this piece of string. So how about we increase the size? And we can do that by using a function called text size. And then we're going to provide size, and then let's set size to 100. All right, and as you can see here, this is not the font p5.js-regular. So we need to change the font as well, and we can do that using a function called text font, and then we want to provide our font variable in there. Perfect. And as I mentioned earlier, this piece of text is drawn based on the bottom left corner of where the text starts. But what if we want to control it by the top left corner of where the text starts? We can do that using a function called textBounds. So let's quickly look at the reference page. So textBounds is a function that returns the bounding box for a string of text written using the font. The bounding box is the smallest rectangle that can contain a string of text. Font.textBounds returns an object with the bounding box's location and size. So this is how we're going to call this function. So let's look at the syntax. So we're going to call textBounds, and we need to provide 4 arguments. The string, which is the text, right? And then the x and y location of the x and y coordinate of the text. This is the bottom left corner, which is what we have as x and y, and then the font size. How about in setup, we declare a variable. Actually, let's declare it outside here. bbox for bounding box. And I'm going to set it to font.textBounds. And then the 4 arguments that we're going to put in here is the text t, x and y location of the bottom left corner, and the size. And then how about we print what bbox is? So as you can see here, it returns an object with 4 values: the x and y coordinates of the top left corner of the bounding box, and the width and the height. So now what we can do is, how about we also declare width and height? And then what I'm going to do, actually I'm going to also declare position, and position is going to be a vector. And a vector is an object that can hold 2 to 3 values, but we're going to be holding 2 values, the x and y coordinate of the top left corner of this bounding box. So let's set it to a function, a method within the vector class, create vector, and then let's put in bbox.x and then bbox.y. And then how about we set width to bbox.w and then h to bbox.h. And then I'm actually going to declare 4 more variables. So let's start a new line. 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and then 0.4. And 0.1 will be the top left corner, 0.2 will be the top right corner, 0.3 will be the bottom right corner, and then 0.4 will be the bottom left corner. And so now let's declare these points. So actually position here is also the top left corner point, right? So how about we just set 0.1 to be equal to position. And then 0.2 will be a vector. And we can just use the function create vector again, and it will be relative to 0.1. And we can easily just do pt1 of x plus the width, right? But because this letter will rotate over time, I want to make sure that when the angle changes, it will rotate accordingly. And we can do that using trigonometry. So it will be 0.1.x plus the width times cosine of angle, and pt1.x, y plus w times sine of angle. And then for 0.3, if you look at this image here, what we need is that we need a vector that is relative to 0.2, so it will be pt2.x minus, actually, right, the height times sine of angle, and pt2.y plus h times cosine of angle. And same logic goes for the fourth point, pt4, but instead of 0.2 here, we'll be using 0.1, pt1.x minus h times sine of angle, and then pt1.y plus h times cosine of angle. All right, so once we have this set, how about we draw lines? Let's start with the first line. So let's do the top line. So it will be between 0.1 and 0.2. So we can just do pt1.x, pt1.y, pt2.x, and then pt2.y. Oops, we don't have angle declare yet. So let's declare angle, start it at 0. All right. And now we get the top one. And so we basically just call line function 3 more times. So for the right one, it will be between 0.2 and 0.3, right? Let's try it. Okay. And then for the bottom one will be between 0.3 and 0.4. Okay, and then the last one will be 0.1 and 0.4. So this will be left. All right, and how about I set angle and map it to my mouse location between 0 and width and 0 and 360. And because we're using degrees, right, we need to make sure that inside the setup function, we need to change the angle mode to degrees. But nothing is moving. And that is because we're not updating the position of these points anymore inside draw. So how about we write a function called set bounding box location. And then I'm going to copy this inside here, and we want to call it twice. One inside the setup function when we first create these locations, and then we want to also update it every time inside the draw function too. Let's try it. So as you can see here, the bounding box moves accordingly, but the letter stays still. And that is because, why? Because the text is drawn based on the X and Y location that is not updated. So we actually want to update this based on these points here, or like these positions here, right, of the bounding box. So what we can do is that first, let's call a translate function. And what a translate function does is that it moves the origin point. And we want to move the origin point because we want to call a rotate function after this. And the rotate function rotates a piece of shape or string in this case around an origin point. So we want to translate it to what point? To the position of the top left corner of the bounding box, which is position vector here. So let's do it. pos.x and then pos.y. And then now that we move this, we can put in 0, 0 here. Can we? Let's try it. We cannot, and that is because the differences between the control points of where the text is drawn and where the bounding box is drawn, right? So the bottom left corner and the top left corner. So we actually want to put h here so that now the piece of string is inside the bounding box. Now we can use a rotate function which will rotate around an origin point, which is this point here. And we can just put angle inside here. And then ta-da! Now our piece of text is rotating with the bounding box. Okay, so before we put everything inside a class, I want to declare an array called alphabets. And alphabets is going to be an array of all the uppercase letters. And instead of setting t equals to a here, inside the setup function, I'm going to set t to a random value inside the alphabets array. And all we need to do is that we need to call a random function and then we put an array inside here. So if I click run, now we have different letters every single time. And it is rotating based on where my mouse location is. Great. Next, let's go to this arrow here, click the plus sign, and then click create file. We're going to create a file called letter.js. Before we can start writing a class, let's go to index.html. And what we want to do is that we want to come to this line of code here, copy and paste, and then put the new file that we just created. In my case, it's called letter.js. And this is how we integrate a new JavaScript file into the program. And now we're ready. So let's go to letter.js. Let's start by creating a class called letter. And then how about start with the constructor function. So what do we want to put inside here? Let's go back to Sketch. So how about we start with these variables first? So what do we have here? So we have the letter t. So this dot t, the variable t, and we want to set it to a random value inside the alphabets array, right? And then this dot x will be width divided by 2. This dot y will be height divided by 2. We'll set this dot size to be at 100. Same thing, and then this dot angle to be 0. All right. So now we take care of all of this. Next, let's take care of this part. So we want to set the bounding box to this function here, right? So let's put on this dot for all of this. Here is the position vector, which is the x and y location of the bounding box, right? And then the width and the height. Great. And then now we can delete this. And here are for the 4 points here is the set bb location, right? Which is this function here. So let's copy and paste inside our class. All right. So inside the class, we don't need the word function anymore. All right, and then we need this dot for everything. All right, so I think we're ready. We're done with the constructor function. So now let's do this part here, which is the display function. Actually, I forgot to call this method here inside the constructor function. So to call the method inside the class, all you need to do is put the word this dot and then put the name of the method. Okay. Now inside display, so we want to call setBB location again. Then we're gonna call all these line functions, and we also need to put this dot for everything. All right, so I think we're ready to create this one letter object. So let's go back to sketch.js, and then I'm going to declare a variable called L. And then inside setup here, L will be a new letter object. And we can just call display. Oh, and then this has to be L.angle, right? Okay, yay. All right. Now let's write an update method. And what is going to be in this method? We're going to update. How about start with the location of the letter? So actually inside the constructor function here, I'm going to organize it a little bit. I want to put this dot angle down here. And then I'm going to label this as location. And then I'm going to label this as movement. I want to create another vector called vel for velocity, and this is going to be the speed and direction at which I'm going to move the piece of letter. So it's going to be a vector object, and I want to start it at 0, 1. So I want it to fall down at 1 pixel at a time. And then I'm also going to set angle v for angle velocity and set it equals to 1. And then inside the update function, actually I'm going to move this method after display. All right, so inside update, what we want to do is that we want to add the velocity vector to the position vector. And we can do that by using a method inside a vector class called add. So we are going to do this .pose.add and then this .vel. And what this method does, basically just add the x component of this vel vector to the pose vector and the y component of this vel vector to the pose vector. All right, and then we want to also update this .angle with this .angle v. Okay, let's try that. So let's just call it L.update, and then I'm going to, actually I think we can just delete this now. All right, so it's falling and rotating at the same time. Nice. Okay, so next what we need to do is that we need to create a wiper. And this wiper, when collides with this piece of string, it's going to do something, right? So we need to write some sort of a collision detection algorithm. What we're gonna write is an equation that checks the collision between lines. So I'm going to declare this method line to line, and the parameter that we're going to give here is going to be 4 sets of points. So it's going to be 2 points for one line and then 2 points for another line. So let's call it A, B, and then C, D. So first let me write out the equation, then I'll explain how it works. So I'm going to declare a variable called t, and then t is going to be equals to this equation here, and another variable called u, and u will be equals to this equation here. I'm not going to explain details how these equations work in this video. I'll link it down below where I do explain that. But essentially, the variable t here, if it has a value between 0 and 1, it is on the line AB. And the variable u here, if it has a value between 0 and 1, it is on the line CD. So we want to write a conditional statement that says if t is greater or equals to 0, and t is less than or equals to 1, and u is greater or equals to 0, and u is less than or equals to 1, then the two lines collide, return true. and else return false. And that is because if T is on AB and also U is on CD, then if all of these conditions are true, it means that the two lines are actually on top of each other. Okay, so once we have this, we're going to write another function, another method called collide. And this will take in two arguments, two parameters. Let's call it W1 for wiper 1 and wiper 2. And then I'm going to declare a variable called top, and top will be equal to this method here, so this dot line to line, and it is going to check whether the top line, which is between 0.1 and 0.2, right, and the wiper W1 and W2, this line collide or not. So let's do W1, W2, and this dot 0.1, and then this dot 0.2. All right, let's just start with the top line. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to write a conditional statement that says if top is true, then return true, else return false. And then what we want to do now is that we want to come to update here, and then let's call the collide method, right? So it has to be this dot collide, and we want to put in W1 and W2 in here. And so we also need to put these two parameters inside update. And so if this collide returns true, then how about we change the stroke color to a nice pink? Let's do 255, 0200, and then else, let's set the stroke color to be black. Okay, so if we go back to sketch.js, what we want to do now is, how about let's just start by creating two variables, W1. So let's set W1 to a point, let's do 0, 0, and then W2 to be mouse X and mouse Y, and then I want to draw a line based on these 2 points. So W1.x, W1.y, W2.x, and then W2.y. All right, and then inside update here, we need to put what? W1 and W2, right? And actually, let's go back to letter.js quickly. I want to stop it from moving first. All right, so now we have this line. If it hits the top part, then everything changes to pink. But if it hits the rest, nothing happens. Ta-da! Okay. All right, so now how about we do the rest of the sides? So let's come here. I'm going to copy this here 3 times. So right will be between 0.2 and 0.3. Bottom will be between 0.3 and 0.4. And then left will be between 0.1 and 0.4, right? So I don't actually need to set it equals to true here, because like this, it's already is a syntax for equals to true. So let's do top or right or bottom or left. And I think that should be all. Let's try it. So if it hits the left side, turns pink, the top side turns pink. Now I can't really check the bottom right now because it always will hit the left side first. So let's try changing this position here to, how about the bottom right corner here? So it will be width and height. Okay, so bottom works and right works. Yay! Okay, will it work if things rotate? So how about we rotate it by 1? Still okay. So will it work if we have a bunch of letters object? So instead of L here, let's do an array of letters and set another variable called num, start with 10. Then inside here, we want to use a for loop, right? So we'll loop through I equals to 0 to I less than num, I plus plus. And then we're going to call these new object. So letters.I equals to new letter. Then we also need to use a for loop inside draw here to call the update and the display method, right? So let's copy and paste this here. Put letters of I and then letters of I here. Okay, let's try it. Whoa. Cool, but not working. What do you think is going on here? If you have seen my other videos, you know exactly what happened. We didn't put two important functions, push and pop. So push and pop are two very important equations when doing any type of transformation. Push saves the transformation that we want to do. So in this case, we want to translate it to this dot post.x and this dot post.y, as well as rotate this dot angle, right? And then we want to put in pop at the end so that before we call the translate and the rotate function again, it returns back to the original state where the origin point is at the top left corner of the canvas here. So if we do this, it should fix the issue. It did fix the issue, but as you can see now, all of the 10 letters are in the middle of the canvas. So how about we randomize the location? So that is here. So how about we do it between 0 and width? So we can just put width in here, and then same thing for height. Okay. So our collision detection method works perfectly. Great. Now how about we create a wiper class? So let's come to the arrow here again and then click create file. Let's call this file wiper.js. Then we're going to go to index.html file again, do the exact same thing to integrate the wiper JavaScript file to the program. And then now let's write the wiper class. Start with the constructor function. Okay, so what do we need? We need these, right? W1 and W2. But we don't actually want it at this location here. I want it at the bottom, but at the middle. So width divided by 2 and then height. But for the top part of the wiper is not going to be controlled by my mouse location anymore. We're going to be using trigonometry again to figure out what that location is, and it actually is going to be the same equation. So this dot w1.x plus this dot l, which is the length, which I'm going to set right now. How about we set it to 300 times cosine of this dot angle, which we will start at 0. And then same thing for the y component, so w1.y plus this dot l times sine of this dot angle. All right, and then we're gonna write a display method, and that will essentially just be this line here. And we need this dot for everything. Okay, we will need an update function later to move the wiper back and forth, but let's do that after we create one wiper. All right, so here let's create a variable called wiper, and inside setup, wiper will be a new wiper object. All right, and then inside the draw function here, let's just call wiper.display, and then we need to make sure that this W1 and W2 is going to be of the wiper object, right? So wiper.w1 and wiper.w2. And as you can see here, it's at the very bottom and nothing is hitting it right now, so it doesn't turn pink. But now how about we just write an update method to move it around. So I actually want to, how about set the angle to the very top part at 270 degrees, And then what we're going to do is that we're going to move it to the right. Oh, what's going on here is that we have not called the update function. Okay, let's go back. What did I do wrong? So update is changing this dot angle. I see. All right, so as you can see here, this dot w1 and this dot w2 is only set inside the constructor function, which is called once. So we actually also want to copy and paste this inside update, right? Because we want to update these locations every time the draw function is called. All right. But now what we need is that we need a conditional statement that doesn't make this wiper loop around in a circle. I want it to just go back and forth. So how about we write a conditional statement that says if this dot angle is less than, how about 150? I want it to go off the screen a bit by 30 degrees. Or this dot angle is greater than 390. Then I also want to set another variable called speed. Let's set speed to 1. And then instead of adding it to 1 here, we're going to add it to speed. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to change the speed direction every time it is less than 150 or more than 390. We're going to multiply speed by -1. All right, let's try that. So once it hit 390, it comes back. Once it hit 150, it comes back. Ta-da! And you can see that it turns pink whenever it hits the letter. But we don't want it to just hit and turn pink, right? We want it to actually hit it and make the letters move. So let's go back to letter.js file here. So first, what we want to do is that I want the angle v at inside the constructor function to be 0. I want to start at 0. And then I want to add something in here. Instead of changing to pink, we're going to say that. So what I want to do is that when the wiper moves in the positive direction, so when it moves clockwise, I want, whenever it hits a letter, I want to move the X location of the letter to the right. And also I want to change the angle velocity of the letter to forward, as in move it clockwise. So what we're going to do is that we're going to say if speed is greater than 0, so it's going to the right, so we also need to add speed in here. So if speed is greater than 0, then we're going to set this dot vel here, this dot vel to be a vector that move stuff to the right. So I want to move it by, let's create a new variable called hit v and 0. So it's only going to move in the X direction, and then this hit v will be, let's say 5, right? And then I also want to set the angle velocity to be, how about 0.5. All right, and then else, then we want to do the same thing, but negative. And then, yeah, I think, oh, one more thing is I want the letter to fall. So I'm changing the y value of this vel vector so that it's falling down every time. Okay, let's try that. Whoa. Okay. Something is wrong. Did you see that? It hits to the right, but then it moves to the left. And I think that is because I forgot to call the third argument here, which is going to be wiper.speed. So how about we try that? Ta-da! All right. Okay, but as you can see, as it gets hit, to the left and to the right, or when it falls off the screen, it's gone. And we don't want that. So let's go back to letter.js. We want to, inside update here, we want to write another conditional statement that says if this dot pose dot y is greater than height, right? Or this dot pose dot x is greater than width, or this dot pose dot x is less than 0. Then what do we want to do? We basically want to create new objects. So we want to basically call all of this again, but this would be tedious to copy. So how about I create a method called reset, and we're going to copy all of this. Yeah, all of this. And then we can delete this and call this dot reset. Okay. All right, and then we want to reset it here as well. So let's try. Ooh, it's working, but not as I intended. So as you can see, do you see that? Like the letters just kind of pop out of nowhere. So that's one thing. And as you can see, when it moves off the screen to the right or to the left, it kind of just disappears. So let's fix that one first. So that is because this pose.x is greater than width or less than 0. Sometimes it's not off the screen yet. So how about we create a margin to make sure that it's off the screen, and we want to add it to width plus margin here, and also subtract it to 0 here, minus margin. So that should fix that. And then inside reset, we don't want it to be at random height actually. We want it to be random but off the screen to the top. So let's do -100 to -10 so that it seems like it's falling like rain. And how about we do a smaller size of 30? Okay. That's not bad. It's pretty good. All right, so that's exactly what we want to do, and it works. So now let's make it pretty, which is our last step. First, I'm going to change the size of my canvas. Let's do 500 by 200. And then we're going to change the background color to this blue color. And I'm going to actually also set the wiper stroke color to black, and the stroke weight, I want it to be much thicker at 10. And then for the letter, so we don't want to display the lines anymore, right? In display here, we can comment this out. And then for the letters, I want it to have no stroke, but I want to fill it with the color white. And let's change num to 30. How about that? Let's try it. Ta-da! So that's my attempt to recreate this piece by Jungmin Kim, and I think in his piece it's a little bit more complicated because actually the letters do have some sort of collision detection so that the letters do not overlap as well. But I think this will give you a lot to play around with already, and so give this one a try.